Hi, thank you so much for tuning in. Someone asked a question about, if you're in the diaspora and you want to invest back home, what are the hottest places to invest in? So I'm going to be addressing some of addressing this question with you by sharing some of my thoughts. You're watching On Land in Kenya. I'm Solomon Wangwe. First answer to that question, in my view, is what's your goal? There are several hot places to invest in Kenya. That's just a reality, and that is true for many parts of the continent, not just in Kenya. So where to invest will very largely depend on your goal. What's your intent? If you were to ask me if budgets were not an issue for me, if you're in the diaspora and trying to make a decision about where to invest and you have a nice amount of capital to put in my view, I would be investing everything I could into Westlands, right? Westlands and Upper Hill, those for me would be the hottest places to invest. But those are the most expensive parts of the country to invest in as well. And the reason for that is because there's a kind of gentrification that's taking place in Kenya, specifically in these parts of Nairobi, that a lot of us are oblivious to or not paying enough attention to. And so what do I mean by gentrification? Gentrification, you can look it up in the dictionary, Wikipedia, and that basically suggests a change in the demographic ownership of a particular area, very largely driven by value or cost, right? And that's exactly what is happening in Westlands and Upper Hill. It's been happening in Upper Hill for longer than it's been happening in Westlands, but it's beginning to spread. And we're finding that we as locals are getting priced out of our own market. We cannot afford to buy an acre of land in Westlands anymore, even as middle class. In very many cases, in the upper class and some high net worth sections, find it impossible to buy land in Westlands and Upper Hill. And that's primarily because there's a shift in usage of land. So if you drive down any number of streets in Westlands, you will not fail to notice a number of cranes that are up, constructing tall structures, commercial spaces, whether it's office spaces, shopping areas, and even high-end apartments. And a lot of these are being constructed by Chinese companies. And one of the shocking things I came to learn is a lot of these companies are able to do this because they get very cheap loans from the government, which is very active in supporting their outreaches into foreign markets and making viable investments. So they give them very low interest rates, in some cases 2-3% from what I've heard. And in some cases, these companies are actually subsidiaries of the Chinese government itself. So it's Chinese government doing business as, whatever limited company that's bought land in Westlands, in some cases 2 to 3 times the market value. So how are you going to compete? If the land was worth 200 million per acre, but the Chinese company came and paid almost 600 million per acre, how am I going to compete with that, right? Why would they do that? Simply because the land I was intending to buy was zoned residential, but it's now commercially viable, so they will change its use to commercial and put up a 42-story building that will have high-end apartments, office spaces, shopping areas, and it's a lot more productive as an asset than it was previously being zoned as residential. And so with that kind of thinking and that kind of access to capital, it doesn't matter what they pay for the land. And me as a local, impossible to compete, right? And so that's what's driving this whole gentrification process. And it's something that's only gonna keep increasing in frequency, and valuations are going to get astronomical. I've heard of acres in Upper Hill that are priced at almost 1 billion shillings. I heard of one recently that was priced at 1.2 billion shillings for an acre of land in Upper Hill. Why? Because the people making those investments can afford it, and we as locals simply do not have the economy of scale to afford that land and to develop it to the point where it makes sense financially to pay 1.2 billion shillings for the land. And so this is exactly why I would put my money in Westlands if budget was not a concern, because I can ride that wave. Now, if you can't do that in Westlands, it's okay. There are plenty of other places where you can ride that wave, not at that scale, but it's happening nonetheless in places like Nanyuki. It's happening in places like the coast, especially along the beach frontages. It's happening along the lake frontages in Naivasha. That's been happening for the last 4 or 5 years, and it's increasing in intensity. It's happening at Lake Elementaita now. I'll be very open about this particular example. We paid about almost 3 years ago, we bought 6.85 acres of land on the lakefront at Elementaita. We paid what at the time was about 5.65 million shillings per acre. At the time, there were pieces of land available for about 2.5 million shillings per acre, but those were tiny pieces, 1 acre, maybe 2.5 acres at a time, and some of them were not even lake frontages, meaning they did not touch the water's edge. And we were very deliberate about buying something that was at the water's edge as Goshen acquisitions, because location is critical, unique geographic propositions, as I've mentioned before, that guarantees desirability over time. Even if nothing else changes in that area, I know that land will be worth a lot more than it is now, or what we paid for it, just because it fronts the water. Simple to understand, right? So we made the decision, and it was a huge stretch for us as a business. It was the most expensive land we'd ever bought, and it was pricier than what was just behind it by almost a factor of 2. But we made the decision to spend the money. Just last year, a neighbor not too far off, 99 meters from us, exactly on the waterfront, was selling parcels of land, I should say plots of land, not even parcels, just second row from the water, not even touching the water's edge. They were selling plots of land measuring 40 feet by 60 feet. That's 2,400 square feet. Mathematically, that is smaller than a 16th of an acre. An eighth of an acre measures about 50 feet by 100 feet. That's 5,000 square feet, right? These guys were selling less than half that, 2,400 square feet for 5.5 million shillings. Just 2.5 years after we paid 5.65 million for an entire acre. That's what you will pay now for less than a 16th of an acre. How do you even explain that? It's very simple. What's happened is a lot of people have now begun to consider the lake frontages as viable commercial investments, and so they're willing to pay whatever it takes to secure ownership. It doesn't matter what the price was 2 years ago. In very many cases, there are no models to explain what's happening, but the locals are reaping the rewards in some sense, because they're getting astronomical amounts of money for land that they could sell for 16 times lower than they can collect now. But whoever is buying is not local. It's people from Nairobi, it's foreigners, people who have the financial ability to pay that much. And so over the next, I'd say 5 to 10 years, in my own view, the entire ownership profile along the lakefront will be completely different from what it is now. And people might be up in arms about what happened, having been caught off guard, but it's a normal cycle with economic growth. It happens everywhere in the world. The point is, you need to know where this is happening so that you can position yourself appropriately to ride that wave. That's why we say you always need to make money when you buy, not when you sell. One of the ways to ensure that happens is that you know where to strategically place yourself so that you can take advantage of these opportunities. I hope those thoughts mean something to you. If you have any comments to make or questions to ask around this topic, feel free to reach out to us. Send us an email, inquiry@goshenacquisitions.com. You can check out our website, www.goshenacquisitions.com. You can call us at 0700010001. You can even send us comments on our YouTube channel after you subscribe, and we'll be happy to engage with you. You've been watching Own Land in Kenya. I'm Solomon Wangwe. Stay tuned for more information on strategic land investment.